101 Part-Time Jobs is the name of the game. If you're listening to this, you probably know how difficult it is to get a job to cover the bills. Indeed Flex is a simple app that covers that with temporary and flexible work available when you need it. I spent my whole 20s going job to job, feeling guilty when I left a role to go traveling or playing music. I did retail, delivery driving, bar work. It took me years to realize that feeling of guilt wasn't necessary. Looking back, it was because my only options were working at places that made you feel like you should work there forever. Indeed Flex is designed for people looking for temporary and flexible work that fits around their schedule. You just download the app, have a quick interview, and you're ready to go. There are thousands of shifts on the app, so you can pick and choose the ones you want. No messing around, no lengthy CVs and cover letters. Just start earning. With the holidays fast approaching, if you're looking for more funds, head to Indeed Flex to find your next temporary role.
The detective said missing kids usually come home. What happens when they don't?
Based on a true story.
Police looking for John Gacy.
We discovered bodies. By the looks of it, they're younger men.
The things he did to those kids. He's sick.
The system failed these families.
Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Do you know how many there are?
Up to you to find out.
Welcome, Nish.
What a pleasure to be here.
Have you ever played in a band?
No, I've never played in a band. I mean, I do play the guitar, but I play it infrequently in public. Actually, that's not true. So I have played in a band recently. So like about 6 or 7 years ago, my friend Paul Williams, who is a comedian from New Zealand and is also the equivalent of Alex Horne on New Zealand Taskmaster. So he's like a comedian and he's the Taskmaster's assistant on New Zealand Taskmaster. He also writes and sings these incredibly beautiful, very melodic pop songs. And he made an album about, I can't even remember, I think it might be 2017. And it was called Surf Music, and he was staying with me, and he saw that I had guitars in my house, and he said, do you play guitar? And I said, yes. And Paul and I are good friends, which is testament to how little I play guitar in public, that even he was like, why do you have these guitars in your fucking house? And so he said, will you play the guitar on this song of mine? So I was like, yeah. Nice. So I played on it, and now, in the last couple of years, he started doing live performances of that because as his kind of fame as a comedian has grown, he has basically, his album has become more prominent. And so he now does live gigs. And so he and I have done, I did Earth in Hackney, and we've done a couple at the Edinburgh Fringe where I play my guitar in front of an audience. And it is genuinely the most terrifying thing I have ever done in my fucking life. Like, I find it horrifying and scary, and immediately afterwards I have to ingest 4 pints of beer minimum just to like process the nerves and the kind of tension of it. And I'm very often only playing 2 songs on it, but it's very scary but a lot of fun. So I've done that a couple of times. And when I did the UK version of Taskmaster, I did play my guitar on the show. So there is some public domain, there is some publicly available footage and evidence of me playing the guitar in public.
What you say about being like panic stricken, you know, up there, just like cold, hot sweats. Yeah. That's what most people, most musicians would think about stand-up comedians.
Yeah, it's a fucking lie. Stand-up comedy is the easiest thing in the world. We've just got incredible PR. We've managed to make people think that it's the most difficult thing possible in human history. It's a fucking piece of piss.
There's a respect.
So easy.
There's a respect between comedians and musicians, and I feel like...
Well, comedians wish we were musicians, really. Like, a lot of comedians just simply wish we had been musicians, and there's a lot of comedians that are, like, either have been in bands or were musicians, or are, like, obsessive music fans.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the opposite is true.
Well...
I don't know if Bob Dylan is sleeping at night thinking, I wish I'd been a stand-up comedian.
Maybe not Bob Dylan, but I think a lot of people in bands where they're sharing the checks with 4 other members.
Sorry. Yes, I did.
You can get a train everywhere.
Yeah, I did fail to mention there is one huge benefit of being a comedian, and that is the money. There are times where I play venues and like my friends' bands will have played the same room the night before.
Right.
And you'll just think, I don't have to share any of this money.
And their production, they'd have to like bring lights, a PA.
Absolutely nothing. I cannot emphasize, there is no art or skill involved in stand-up comedy. But then the reciprocal thing is comedians are jealous of musicians on any number of, social cachet, cultural appreciation. We're jealous of them. But also comedians are very jealous of musicians because when people go to see a band, they are happy to watch a band play old songs. And in fact, sometimes they're like excited for a band to play old songs and get annoyed when a band does new songs. People get very frustrated.
But that band is being like, oh, fucking hell, not this one again.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a really interesting dichotomy because on the one hand, comedians are like, oh man, I've written a show, I would love to tour this for 25 years. But then at the same time...
This one's really good.
But then at the same time, there is a part of you that like, it must be quite weird if you're a musician and like, I've seen the Rolling Stones live. I saw the Stones live at Glastonbury in 2013. And, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are on stage singing songs that they wrote when they were 22 or 23, and that must be a really weird experience. And like, there are times where comedians think, I wish we could just do the same jokes that we've written before. Yeah. But then at the same time, I imagine that can be its own type of gilded cage.
This is definitely a bit posy, but it's like, but you get to keep on writing. That's the challenge. Enjoy the challenge.
Yeah, I can't be bothered. As I increasingly age, I was like, man, I would love to phone it in. Yeah. I don't even want to phone it in. I want to fax it in. I want to, like, there is part of you that's like, it'd be really good to sort of not have to keep doing it. But then that is the sort of, the challenge and the fun of it. Because people go to comedy shows and they think they want to hear old jokes that they've heard before. That's the real problem. People sometimes are like, could you do that old bit? And you're like, no, you think you want to hear that. But in reality, if I started doing an old bit that you knew, you'd go, I know this bit. It's boring. And like, you could rewatch like a stand-up comedian's special over and over again, because I think that is a different experience. Like the film, watching it on tape is like a different tape. Fucking hell. Hello, I'm 70 years old. Watching it on reel-to-reel, watching a recording of it is a different thing. But live, there's a real like communal thing of experiencing a song. Like that Thunder Road was playing. If you're in there's 20,000 people there and you're all listening to Thunder Road, there's like a real powerful catharsis to that. But watching a comedian do a routine live that you've seen and that you might enjoy rewatching on video on your telly, that's a different experience. You actually would not get the same pleasure out of watching, no matter how much you loved a routine.
I think when you rewatch that DVD, for me, you know the beat, when it lands, it's satisfying because you know the exact timing, the exact beat of it.
I can watch John Mulaney do his Bill Clinton story every day from now until I'm dead. Like that, I'm always enjoy it. It's always fun. But if I went to see him live, I would expect him to do, I would expect a new show. And that's one of the sort of differences, I would say.
That job of being a comedian, I mean, when did it become your job? When was there a moment and you were like, okay, I can pay rent for the next 3 months, I can go for a nice dinner, I can have 4 pints without feeling guilty about it? Was there a period of time?
Well, the guilt is there for the pints. It's just different. It's not financial. It's just sort of physical and chemical. I know exactly, I think it's quite weird that I know the specific dates of this, but because I do the Edinburgh Fringe a lot, I can demarcate my life by the Augusts that I've lived through. Also, my birthday is in August. So, I know exactly the year and the age that I was for everything. So, I had just turned 28 in 2013. And that Edinburgh, I left my temp job and I knew that I basically lived on a ratio, and my income ratio started at 0% from comedy, 100% from various office temp jobs. And then I basically just slowly, over a period of about 5 years, made the shift. And then in the 6th year, I was working part-time. So I'd got to that point. And then after that August in 2013, I've not had a proper job since then.
And what was it? Was it that you got your fee went higher?
No, it was just literally I had enough work. The problem with any of these jobs, the problem with stand-up, is that you would fill your diary with gigs, but you weren't sure when the money would come in. And also you would spend money on going to Edinburgh, and that would be, that was a month that you weren't making any money or you were losing money. So then what happened was that I had enough savings to manage the point. As anyone who's self-employed will know, you don't know when your money's coming in. You know it's coming. You know legally they have to pay you, but it could be anywhere between 24 hours and 24 years. So you don't know when that money is coming in. There's a lot of, for the benefit of the podcast listeners, there's a lot of nodding at the trendy brewery in Walthamstow.
That's why you've got to put on your invoice.
Self-employed people, yeah.
You've got to put on your invoice, please pay within, not 7 days. 24 hours, please.
Because
it doesn't matter.
No one fucking listens. Like you can put, you need to pay this in 2 days or I will break your legs, and still the money won't come into your goddamn account. But so 2013, summer 2013 was the point where I thought, I have enough money saved up, I have enough work in, and when Edinburgh finishes, I'm going to be able to stop doing this job permanently. And that did work, and that did hold. It was a bit hairy for the first 12 months. Right. Bit hairy. So, and then it was fine from there.
I wanted to talk about this at some point, but like now's a good time. Like Edinburgh is just so expensive for all comedians.
Yes.
Like the shorthand is what? You stay there for a month,
yes.
Everything's expensive. All the landlords or Airbnbs hike up their prices 5 times the amount.
Yeah.
Everything costs.
Yeah.
So the only people going there are going to be the people who can afford it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're 21 or 25 or 30 years old, no one with a regular job can do that. You basically have to be middle class or wealthy or being lent or just given money by your parents or family.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky because the era that I was really starting out in the kind of late 2000s, they'd kind of started doing free fringe shows. So the venues didn't charge, and then you got to keep a bucket that you would put out at the end of the show. Like literally like the early Greenwich Village folk scene. Like you would put a bucket or a hat around and that was how you got your money. But you didn't have to pay any upfront costs. So we used to split the cost like between 4 of us of a 2-bedroom flat in Edinburgh. And we would go and do Edinburgh for the month. Then when I started doing solo shows in 2012, I got very, very lucky in that my management had a mad deal at the time where they would pay all the costs. So I was the luckiest person and the thing is that investment did pay off because like me, James Acaster, John Robbins, Ellis James, like a bunch of us were on that deal and we ended up having very successful runs in Edinburgh. Yeah. And part of that reason, I think, is because we were not stressing about losing 10 grand. But we didn't make any money. So for context, in 2012, the best deal in Edinburgh was you would make £0 for the month. And now, if I said that deal to a comedian, they'd be like, that's like Willy Wonka's golden ticket. Right. And even at the time, we were considered to be incredibly fortunate contextually. And we were very, very lucky. So we had those deals meant that I was able to do Edinburgh for 3 years and not incur any expenses and not get into debt. And it's the reason, it's a big part of the reason why I'm able to be, like I was able to be a comedian. It is unfortunately just the result of economics, right? Like if you're wondering why bands are all posh or you're wondering why comedians are all posh or any of this kind of stuff, it's literally because the early years, the apprenticeship in most art forms is unpaid. And so when economic conditions mean that housing is incredibly expensive and mean that there are no, like comedians in the 80s, like Stuart Lee always talks about it. He was like, we just lived on the dole for like a couple of years. Yeah. And, Stuart Lee living on the dole ended up working out very well for the Exchequer because in income tax, he's probably, and, the revenue that he generates on his tours, he has repaid that and it was the investment in him. They have got back 1 million times over and over. It makes sense to invest. But occasionally it burbles up and people on the internet will be very angry with a band or like an actor or something. And there's a culture of being very angry with nepo babies, which I understand that there's like a kind of, it makes sense that people don't know where to direct their anger, so they direct it at individuals. But the problem is what you're missing there is a systemic problem, and it goes beyond just kind of artistic investment. It goes into the very heart of like the core of our economic problems, and that is work pays less. It's more expensive to live. Like, housing is the most important thing. From a stand-up comedian's perspective, the best thing about stand-up comedy is that it requires no start-up costs. You don't need equipment. You don't need anything. You just turn up and talk into, at times, an absolute piece of shit mic that's
Excuse
about
me?
40 years old. Not this one. Not this one, Giles. Oh, Giles, I would have killed for this level of amplification. In most of the gigs I did for the first 5 years of my career, I would have absolutely murdered for it. You think those mics had muffs? But yeah, so it requires no startup costs. The reason stand-up comedy is obstructive to getting in now is because housing is incredibly expensive. So everything is connected, you know. So so if you're angry with nepo babies, I understand that frustration, but you have to be aware of the systemic factors that are creating a culture where art is only coming from middle and upper middle class and upper class backgrounds. And that is not what any of us want. That is not what any of us want. And we don't talk enough about, you know, the systemic conditions in the kind of post-war period that allowed for working class boys from Liverpool to go to art school. So they had 2 years to experiment. And again, that state investment, they have got back 1 trillion times over. Like, the fucking Beatles have put more money into this country than so many CEOs of multinational companies. Like, that's just a reality of it. But it happens because of state investment. And we have to work out ways to we need more affordable housing. We need a better functioning health service. We need a functioning social safety net. And all of those things are worthwhile investments because they create and cultivate conditions in which artists and artistic communities can thrive and flourish. Like, it's important that instead of going on Twitter and screaming at a musician, think about the political and social conditions and economic conditions that are leading to a situation where no one wants bands to all be posh. Who wants that? Otherwise, every band will sound like, I'm not going to say the name of any bands, okay? Because I've started enough beefs in my life in the comedy industry. I need to widen that out to music as well. But whichever band you're angry about, insert the name of that band in here. And like, it's about understanding this wider systemic conditions. And yet, we also need to invest in art. We need to invest in grassroots music venues, but also a big factor at the moment is that we've all been done over by the internet. And there was this excitement that, you know, the internet would create these kind of global audiences. And for some people it has. But also, you know, my friends in bands always tell me, like, the economics of music streaming, it just doesn't work. I don't know what the answer is to that. But, you know, I'm pretty sure that the net benefit of the tech industry is not something that musicians are actually seeing. It's actually having a detrimental impact on our cultural life. But the reality is, why were we so dumb in the creative industries? Why did we think that we were cleverer than cab drivers? That's the thing that upsets me the most, right? Taxi industry, they see Uber coming, they think, fantastic, this is creating a whole new way, of us selling our product directly to consumers. But we all failed to acknowledge the fact that all of these tech companies are middlemen and they're parasites, and they essentially just suck capital out. If you get a taxi now in the United Kingdom, it's harder to get and it's more expensive than it was. That money is not going to the cab driver, okay? The cab driver, you talk to any cab driver at the moment, they've all got 4 jobs. When I was a kid, my neighbour was a mini cab driver. He was able to buy a house and support 2 kids on a mini cab driver salary. That should still be the case. We view these tech...
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought someone was shouting at me. We view these tech companies as being portals to independent income. They are parasites that are squatting down over every single one of our industries. And we saw it happen with Uber. And for some reason in the entertainment industry, we were like, Spotify and Netflix, this is brilliant. We'll just throw in all of our lot with these people. We are not smarter than cab drivers. They have to be able to drive. They have to know where things are. We're comedians of music. We're, by definition, fucking stupider than these people. And yet somehow we fell for the same trap. Everybody is falling for this kind of, these parasitic tech companies and their myths about
it being for the benefit of grassroots. It's not. It's for the benefit of, it's consolidating more power and more capital in an even smaller percentage. It's capitalism on steroids. It's not a silver bullet that's going to destroy big corporations. I can be a buzzkill on anything. Whatever podcast you get me on, I will somehow end up using the phrase, the problem is capitalism.
All the jobs that you did work, and did you get quite smart at pinching your pennies? Did you know, you said that you had 5 years between starting comedy and kind of getting to that sort of pinch moment.
Nothing about my behaviour for those 5 years would ever be described as smart. Those 5 years of my life are like a combination of... Basically, those 5 years of my life are my undiagnosed mental health problem era. Just a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of... I seem to be drinking constantly and nothing is improving. Like that sort of vibe for me in that period. I was making a lot of like bad decisions in that period of time. But it's just because like I was unhappy and also I was exhausted a lot of the time. I was working 9 to 5. Or I had temp jobs, so I'd work from 10 till 6, and then I would leave immediately, eat a Boots meal deal on the tube to one of the major train stations in London, and then get a train somewhere, do a gig, and then go home, and then start the entire process again in the morning. Like, I don't... That time was necessary for me, and I'm lucky it happened, but I don't... Sometimes when people get famous, they're like, maybe in many ways it was easier back when I was starting out. Yeah. No. My experience is it's much easier to be rich. I'm very sorry if that's a controversial thing to say. My life is so much easier now that I'm rich and famous. I have no fetishization. I have no rose-tinted glasses over my mid-20s, I would say.
I saw a bit of James Acaster the other day saying...
Oh, that motherfucker.
He now that he has more money, he can afford therapy.
Yeah.
He can speak to someone every week about the problems that him and a lot of people have with themselves.
Yeah. Listen, he and I are two of history's maddest cunts. Like, really. But when we met when we first became friends in our mid-20s, it wasn't like we didn't know that we didn't have mental health problems. We just didn't have the time or the money to, that's why sometimes people with money will say stuff that, there was like a period of time where people on the internet would say, guys, you've got to go to therapy. And you're like, dude, people would if they could afford it. But yeah, it definitely like for people like Acaster and me who have had, have been quite open with our various mental health issues. Definitely there is a factor in all of it is you can afford to pay for therapy and not deal with long waiting lists on the NHS. Like that's just a reality of where we are as a society at the moment.
You met James Acaster in the early 20s. You also went to uni with Ed Gamble.
Yes.
You were meeting all these pretty bona fide legends.
Yeah.
Where all of you get together. It's kind of like it's fucking cream of the crop British comedy.
Well, I like to say that we're the best of a bad bunch. I like to say we're the best comedians of a poor crime. I met Ed at university. And I met James when I was in my sort of early 20s, in that era where I was doing office jobs. He worked as a teacher's assistant in a school for kids with very specific learning difficulties. That was the jobs that we were doing when we first met.
You've all got good music taste as well. James has got great music taste. Ed Gamble is into his heavier stuff.
Ed Gamble loves heavy metal. And it's very funny that he does because, and this is he's made jokes about this before, but he really looks like a youth pastor. And I think he's had to get loads of tattoos just so that he doesn't stick out like a sore thumb when he goes to Bloodstock. But yeah, he's always loved heavy metal. Acaster and I spend a lot of, most of my life is text conversations with him about some he's found some fucking Peruvian folk band that released one album in 1983 that's somehow only available on Laserdisc. He's a good person to be friends with if you're into music because he spends a lot of time looking for new music. He spends a lot of energy looking for new music, and it's a lot of our conversations are music based and what albums you're listening to, and we go to gigs together and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a big, huge part of our lives.
Were you ambitious? I mean, you were just saying upstairs that at uni, Ed Gamble was the guy who was like, okay, this is how we're going to do it, guys.
Yeah. So I joined a sketch group at university, and Ed had been in the sketch group for a year before me. But Ed also had more of a sense of comedy as a job. The rest of us were saying, yeah, we'd like to be comedians, but with the sort of energy of a child saying, I'd like to be a fireman. Like, there's no real, like, specificity to it. But Ed had, like, done some reading, and he had looked into the fact that there was this comedy circuit of gigs that you could do weekend shows at. You rarely achieve something without, like, if you do something in the kind of creative industries, I think maybe writers it's a bit different, but certainly, like, I think in comedy and music, you rarely see people appear without a kind of community of, like-minded people around them who are sort of supporting each other and also, like, kind of pushing each other and not necessarily, like, pushing each other, like, you know...
I get it. If you go play football with someone who's pretty good, after a while you'll naturally get a bit better.
Yeah,
Same with kind of any sport or hobby. You just kind of start leveling up a little bit.
Yeah, and like I've always said that like a big motivation for me to try and improve my stand-up comedy is that for it to not be embarrassing that I'm friends with James Acaster. Like that has always been like quite a big motivational factor for me. It's not competition. It's just I know he's better than me, but I'm just trying to be less good than him to an amount that it's not embarrassing. That's always been my like ultimate ambition. And yeah, you do often see these like gangs of people emerge. And like I was very lucky to meet Ed when I met him because Ed was sort of, you know, he was like aware of what was going on, and he was also. He was very good, like very quickly. You talk about someone who didn't really have a lot of day jobs because Ed was working as a comic so quickly after we got out of university because he was just so good. And like, especially he's always been a brilliant MC. Like, so he was a really good host. And when you're starting in stand-up, that's actually really good because it's a hard skill. So not a lot of people can do it because it requires a huge amount of improvising with an audience. And so when you see Ed being like the podcast king and hosting loads of podcasts, that makes sense because he's so fucking good off the cuff. Like he's so it's seemingly effortlessly funny off the cuff. And that was a big factor. He got work really, really quickly because of that.
When you came home to Croydon after being at Durham Uni and meeting Ed and other comedians, and you saw people getting work in comedy, and you were doing temp jobs, were there moments where you felt a little bit like, oh, fuck, you know, you're just a little bit downtrodden, a little bit, you know, doubting yourself?
If by moments you mean whole years.
Really?
Yeah, massively. I was really down on myself. And like, it is something that I talk about with my therapist now, that so much of and this is also just to do with like, some of it is to do with, you know, some of it is to do with like second generation immigrant upbringing, which is also, I think, sometimes crosses over with like, aspiring working to lower middle class families. Like there's this idea that you sort of define yourself by your job, and I definitely defined myself by my job and have done my whole life and still do to this day. And so
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah. And you sort of realize that's not really healthy. And actually really part of my problem in my 20s was I was deeply unhappy, very, very much so. And that was because I felt like I wasn't, you know, you sort of feel like you feel like it's never going to happen. You also feel like I feel really guilty because like my parents had to work really hard to like support us when we were kids, and now I've sort of pissed all of that up the wall. Some of that was internal, some of that was external when they would say stuff to me like, you pissed everything we worked for up the wall. But it really did, it affected my self-worth very negatively. I've had a lot of breakdowns in a lot of toilets, in a lot of offices. And sometimes I go past those offices and I go, oh yeah, I remember crying in that toilet. Oh yeah, I remember that, yeah.
How would you pull yourself out of that? I mean, and I guess maybe it's hard to even kind of remember.
You know, I think a big part of how I pulled myself, I mean, pulling yourself out of it is like, also some circumstances changed.
Yeah.
But I think a big factor for me, and this is like, again, I'm talking about a period of time in 2010 where we thought things were bad economically, but they've got so much worse now. And like, so I'm not saying this is a catch-all thing that everyone can do, but a big factor for me was when I stopped this is the most cliched. I'm embarrassed to be saying. I want you to know, as I say this, I am fucking embarrassed to be saying it. But a big factor for me was when I stopped thinking about my career and how I was going to get ahead and thought about the work that I was producing. And instead of thinking, how can I get on this TV show or how can I get signed by this agent, I brought it back to how can I make the material better? How can I make this stand-up comedy funnier? Why isn't it working? And I cut myself off a bit from thinking about the wider professional ramifications of the work that I was producing and focused more on what I was actually writing and what I was actually doing on stage. And
what were you doing on stage around that time?
Shit comedy. But I kind of, when you start in anything, I think if you get too focused on the professional ramifications of what you're doing, you pick up loads of bad habits because you're constantly second guessing what you think is going to sell. And that commercial pressure to turn it into a career leads you down some bad roads. And I just picked up a load of bad habits as a comedian. And I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing on stage. And in about 2010, I was going to do a show in Edinburgh with my friend Tom Neenan, who I've continued to work with for years and years and years, and is another one of my best friends, and was in the Durham Review with me and Ed, and he was the co-head writer on the MASH Report, and he's a brilliant writer. And he and I were going to do a sketch show in Edinburgh that year, and I really at that point was like, I think I might have to knock this on the head, at some point. But anyway, I'm doing the show with Tom. I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, so I'm going to keep doing it. But I didn't have many stand-up gigs in, and I thought I'm just not going to put any stand-up gigs in because I'm doing shit. The gigs are bad. I'm hating it. I hate doing it. I've lost whatever love I had for it. And so I was like, maybe I'll just stop doing stand-up and maybe I'll try and do stuff with Tom and work it out that way. And so but then for some reason, I was like, if I'm going to do these gigs, I've got to actually do them properly. There's no point in me doing them, and I'm not getting paid for them. And actually, it's a distraction from the stuff that I should be thinking about with Tom. So I was like, if I'm going to do them, let me do them properly. And I started listening. In that era, because now obviously everyone can do it on their phones, but in that era, everyone had to have these stupid MP3 recorders, and everyone had the same crappy one that you'd buy on Amazon. And I would record all my gigs and listen to none of them. And so I just had this accumulated hard drive. It was just a steady build-up of failure that I was not engaging with. And I think that was a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to start engaging with this. I'm going to try and start doing this stuff properly. And if I'm going to do these gigs, I've got to actually make them count. And then the gigs started to go better. And then a friend of mine, Daniel Simonson, is a great Norwegian comedian who now lives in New York and is a stand-up in New York. He had an Edinburgh slot booked, but he couldn't. He wanted to split it with somebody because he didn't want to do an hour. So he and I split an hour. And Daniel is like hilariously Norwegian. To an extent where there's a certain type of Scandinavian that does not have the ability to censor their thoughts. That's just my experience of meeting them. They're very nice people, but they will occasionally be very blunt. And so sometimes I would finish a gig and Daniel would go, "That was really shit, man." And just the accountability of having somebody look at me fail every day and not change things was transformative for me. And also Tom and I would really rigorously work on every word that was in the sketch show. And I was like, why am I not doing this with my stand-up? Right. Why am I not being this rigorous and precise in the thing that I'm supposedly want to make as my career?
Was there a gig where you were like, oh, that was the first good one?
I remember doing a gig in Hitchin, and it's a gig that still runs today for promoters called Mostly Comedy. And I remember afterwards, this would be in 2010, and I remember thinking, that went well. And previously, my gigs would go well, and I'd be like, I don't know, this gig went bad, this gig went well. I just didn't know what was going on. It's like I was I was playing Russian roulette every time I stepped on stage. And that was the first time, and I can't really remember why, but that was the first time I remember thinking, I think I was in control of why that went well. For the first time, I was like, I think that went well because I worked really hard at my material. And then it just sort of escalated from there. to be clear, it was still shit. And I still would not stand by anything I said on stage before about 2015. If people find old clips of me doing stand-up and they're like, this is really bad and offensive, I'd be like, absolutely 100%, you are correct. And I take my medicine. And it's only really from 2015 onwards that I can really defend the work that I've produced. Even then, I can't defend all of it. But broadly, I can defend that stuff. But it definitely started a process by which I was sort of, I was getting better. And, I started to be a bit kinder to myself, and I got into a relationship that I'm still in with a person who was like, I don't know why you hate yourself this much. I don't think it's particularly productive. It doesn't seem to have served you particularly well up to this point. So maybe you also, and you can't overestimate the value. I think sometimes people don't really. Maybe people just don't want to talk about it, but I think sometimes you can't overestimate the impact, a positive impact that having a supportive partner can have on your work and your work-life balance, and how someone like that can benefit you massively just by being somebody that you genuinely trust and whose opinion you genuinely take seriously. And that sort of stuff is also, nobody really wants to talk about it, because now we're in this place where everyone's like, it's hustle culture, it's live or die, it's diary of a CEO. And you're like, yes, my girlfriend being nice to me definitely helped me a lot.
It's good to not feel like an asshole. Because I feel like when I've been alone, before I had a supportive partner, I just felt like an asshole every day. I was just like, what am I doing? What is it?
I mean, I still think I'm an asshole most days, but not because of my work, just because I don't clean up after myself. But yeah, all that stuff helped. But all through this period of time I was doing, and I've said this before, and I'm really happy to say this again on this podcast because I think it's important and relevant. I am so apologetic to everyone I temped with and for between the years of 2007 and 2013.
What jobs were they?
I worked in so many different offices. I did loads of data entry. I did also, it's funny because I was literally just at lunch with my friend Rennie and my friend Saz. And my friend Saz and I temped at the same office, which was this place called the Central Office of Information, which was the government's communications department. It was part of the civil service. And we had temp jobs where we would it was just data entry and all this kind of stuff. But the Central Office of Information was one of the first things that got cut in 2010 when Cameron and Osborne started hacking the government to pieces. But it was a bit of the government that everyone was like, who cares? We don't need public messaging. Smash cut to 2020, and we need public messaging desperately to inform people about the nature of a life-threatening pandemic that is sweeping the globe. And we have no public information department. And so articles started appearing in British newspapers saying, oh my God, we could have used the Central Office of Information. But that was one of the places that I tempted. I temped for Hammersmith Council for a while. Okay. Lot of breakdowns in the toilet. Lot of crying on my own poops in that toilet. Let me tell you, every time I go past Hammersmith Town Hall on King Street, a bit of I'm oh, I can actually feel my depression growing back. But yeah, and also I temped with some such nice people. I really remember the day I was temping in one office, and they basically had hid me at the back because I was so hungover that they could, and this is a direct quote, smell it on me. And I turned up to work essentially still drunk, and there was and one of the directors of the company was in, and they basically hid me in a corner so that the director wouldn't come over and smell my drunkenness.
That's very nice of your colleagues.
I temped with so many really nice people, and and then the last job I had, I worked for a friend of my friend doing he was doing a software thing for the NHS. I did loads of office temp jobs in the public sector. I had a brief job working at an accountancy firm that I don't know whether it's legal probably to name them. Anyway, what I will say is I was very fired.
What's the statute of limitations on this?
I actually don't know. I did steal quite a bit of stationery from them, so maybe I shouldn't mention it. But I believe the phrase super fired was thrown around. I was absolutely sacked. And so I did loads of office temp jobs, and I was really happy. I enjoyed one job because I worked with a lot of nice people, and I actually worked there for about 9 months. It was very nice. That was the job where they hid me when I was hungover. But the other job, but Hammersmith Council, the best thing about that job was that they would let me have headphones on.
Yes.
Because they would let me. There wasn't any phone calls. It was just literally piles and piles of data entry, and I would just so I'm like, and this is 2010, and like I'm part of the first wave of people that develop parasocial relationships with podcasters. Like, so now that people have parasocial relationships with me and my friends, I am more sympathetic to them because I genuinely believe that I know Marc Maron. Like, I believe that he and I are friends. And I saw him in a hotel once, and I hugged him. And I don't know him. But he seemed pretty used to intense-looking elder millennial men who have very, very strong emotional attachments to him.
Listening to a lot of music? I mean, when you have a job, you can put your headphones in.
Listening to loads of music. That's still in my iPod era. I still had a fucking iPod back then. Listening to loads of WTF podcasts, listening to loads of the Bugle, Andy Zaltzman and John Oliver's podcast, which I'm now like guest co-host on. And in a sense is like in some ways the maddest job I've ever done because I listen to that podcast so much. And now that I'm on it, it is something like occasionally my girlfriend is like, it should be a bigger deal to you that you do this very regularly, and you shouldn't be casual about this because of how obsessed you were with Zaltzman and John at that point. So listening to loads of podcasts and then listening to just like a lot of music. And like, I was not flush with cash, so I wasn't buying as much music as I would have previously been buying. But there were a lot of albums that when I would get them, I would listen because I would buy them and it was very precious to me. So I would listen to Dear Science by TV on the Radio. Yeah. I listened to that album so fucking much. Like, I was so obsessed with it. And like when they reunited last year, it was genuinely like, I found it because it was basically Oasis ticketing day for a very small percentage of young Gen X and elder millennial hipsters. Like, TV on the Radio's reunion was like a huge fucking deal.
So you went to it?
Oh, I saw them in Islington. I then saw them again at Glastonbury. Like, that band is very special to me. And that album is like very special to me. And when I think about that era, I also think about things like Good Kid, Mad City, Kendrick's second album, Kendrick Lamar. That album I listened to again very intensely when it came out. The Bon Iver album, Forever, that album.
You've
very
got a wide music taste.
Yeah, I got a broad taste. The Broken Bells album, which is James Mercer, who's the lead singer of the Shins, and an album he did with Danger Mouse. Okay. Like, they did like a bunch of albums together, but the first Broken Bells album is absolutely exceptional. I would strongly that's a hard recommend. Those albums are all hard recommend. Good Kid, Mad City, masterpiece. One of the, the only thing with Good Kid, Mad City is it's slightly under-discussed because To Pimp a Butterfly is like, a seminal piece of 21st century art, and he won the Pulitzer Prize for Damn. So like, I understand that people are maybe more sidetracked by those albums, but Good Kid, Mad City is an astonishing. I mean, there's like the true rap fans will make the case that Good Kid, Mad City is the best Kendrick Lamar album. I would disagree on them, but I respect their right to be wrong. But that Good Kid, Mad City, that Broken Bells album I love. Dear Science by TV on the Radio is a flawless, no skips, 10 out of 10 record. That is an incredible, incredible album. The like loose top line at the time was, if for some reason Prince had decided to make an album with Radiohead, like that was the sort of loose top line pitch. And they would often reference Radiohead. So their first EP is called OK Calculator. But they got deep funk into Dear Science.
There's some amazing videos of that time in New York and Brooklyn when it's like, it's TV on the radio, right, and they're all like playing. I don't know if you saw that video of Geese. Did anyone see that video of Geese playing outside in Brooklyn? I feel like Geese is the new band.
Geese, I mean, they're all about fucking 12 years old, but Geese is a fucking crazy band.
So
like,
good.
when the first time I heard 3D Country, it was one of those things where you're like, oh my God, a Gen Z listening to Captain Beefheart, because I feel the like influence of Beefheart, particularly like the guitar sound on things like Clear Spot on the Spotlight Kid. There's a very clear lineage to Geese, and like 3D Country is great. The new album is great. That fucking Cameron Winter solo album That is an incredible record. Like, Geese and Big Thief are very, very, like, especially in an era where we're constantly told that, like, the rock band is dead. Geese and Big Thief, like, that run of Big Thief albums and the Adrianne Lenker solo albums that kind of intersperse them, like, unbelievable. Big Thief as a band, phenomenal. Geese as a band, those fucking dirty 12-year-olds, whatever they're doing is good. And, like, Cameron Winter is very interesting and very talented child.
Where do you get your new music from? Because
James Acaster mainly.
Really?
James Acaster and my
we
friend...
don't live in that monoculture anymore where it's either Enemy or Kerrang obviously Six Music is the biggest one now, but there has to be other places.
Six Music has definitely has some good stuff. There's definitely a lot of like, there's definitely a lot of like, it tends to be social now. Like, it tends to be like my friends. James is very good, and my friend Gabriel Abulu, who's a comedian and used to host a music podcast called the 3-Track Podcast, which I would again urge people to seek out, especially if you're music fans. It's just asking people to pick 3 tracks and talk about them from their life. And like, Gabriel is another person who is like actively on blogs, trying to find new bands. That
Those places still exist, but just the writers don't get paid.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Like music journalism, like the rest of the music industry and the creative arts, is generally like becoming something you can do as a hobby alongside your other job, which is sad because good music writing, good journalism is an important part of how you build out a cultural scene. Like,
how you experience it when you read something that's well written about a band, it can make the music better.
Yeah, and it should draw insight. There's an article, I keep talking about this article because I've done a bunch of Bob Dylan. I'm sort of now like a Bob Dylan, like prognosticator. Like, I'm sort of invited onto shows to talk about Bob Dylan. But there's a piece that Sean O'Hagan wrote about Dylan in the year 2000 that is called, the headline is So How Does It Feel? And it's just a praising of Dylan's career up to the year 2000. And it's one of the like most incisive pieces of writing about a musician, and it includes the phrase, there is no bore like a Dylan bore. And it's very difficult for me because even quoting that back is providing evidence that there is no bore like a Dylan bore.
101 part-time jobs. Nish, I mean, apart from the sort of temp jobs, being the person who you are, which is kind of, as a headline level, like, you're an entertainer, right? You're not just a stand-up comedian, you're an entertainer.
It's sometimes hard to, when there was a bit in my last show where I would read out the set list, and the set list was something like Gaza art, radicalization, elections, integration, power. Like something like that. Doesn't sound like entertainment.
This is your list of things that
That's my set list of what I'm going to talk. That's the topic headings for my fucking stand-up comedy show. And when I saw Beyonce a couple of years, when she was touring Renaissance, and she was like in a car, like flying around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I did think, now this is an entertainer. That's what entertainment should be, really. Not a man yelling into a microphone.
I went to the Hendrix and Handel Museum the other day, and you are there on a widescreen.
Another facet of my job is occasionally I'm required to give my opinion about Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, I did
Get paid for it, do it.
I don't even think I got paid for it. I did that pro bono. Like, I'm such a Hendrix fan that, like, and I did an interview about Hendrix for that museum, and I also did a podcast. And the payment for the podcast, genuinely, was that they've recreated Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was very particular about his stereo system, and he essentially cobbled together equipment to the exact configuration that produced the sound that he wanted.
In his bedroom?
In his bedroom. And they have rebuilt that exact stereo.
That's
and
cool.
They let me listen to the first side of Electric Ladyland through Hendrix's speakers. And it was I was in heaven. I was kissing the sky.
I recommend going to that place because you basically you walk in and you're in Handel's sort of recreation of what Handel's house was like, and then at some point you kind of go through this magic barrier, and then you're in Hendrix's
It's like
old
one of
flat.
the great cosmic coincidences that 200 years apart, Jimi Hendrix and Handel lived in the exact same building in London. It's like one of these like amazing, like kismet, whatever you want to call it. It's this incredible thing. And when Hendrix found out, he was thrilled, and he went and bought loads of Handel records, and he was like listening to Handel because like he was also a kind of, like when you see photos of Hendrix in his house, all you see is just records. Like he was such a music obsessive.
He was just always in bed. He was always in bed.
Listening to a lot of stuff.
Drinking tea.
I think there was a bit more than that to it. But yeah, he was like an obsessive music collector. And also because he had this like, whatever God-given ability, like he could reproduce everything that he heard. Like his brain could translate everything that he was listening to into his hands, really. And like, but he was he was excited about the idea that he was living in the same building as Handel, but he didn't know a lot of Handel music. So then he really like started listening to a lot of it. And yeah, and it's this amazing, like bizarre turn of fate that these two guys were living and working in London and living in the same building, and they've recreated Handel's room and they've recreated Hendrix's bedroom from. I don't know how they've recreated the Handel bit, but obviously
it's the same mirror. It's the same mirror. This is just a massive cell, isn't it? But it's just mad. You're standing in Hendrix's bedroom, looking at the reflection that he would have looked in.
I genuinely went home after I did that and was like, let me play my guitar. Maybe some of the geniuses. No, I was as bad.
I'm a big fan of the work fuck-ups. Yeah. And I wonder for you if there's kind of like two levels to it. There's like the fuck-ups in your new professional life of being on loads of podcasts, MASH Report, TV, radio, where, I mean, I'm sure, have you like turned up late to things? Have you like read the details wrong? Have you fucked up on a professional level recently?
Let's talk, my professional fuck-ups are like a matter of public record. And if you're interested in listening to a very specific or watching a very specific fuck-up, a stand-up show called Your Power, Your Control, which I did, is available to watch on Sky and Now TV or listen to on whatever morally corrupt music streaming service it is that you use. But that is really 80 minutes about a work fuck-up. It's about a gig that I did that went like bad to an extent that it became a news story. And the story of that is available for people to buy on my website at nishkumar.co.uk or just watch it or listen to it.
Was this the Lord's Cricket Ground?
Yeah, it was a cricket gig, a charity gig where I, shall we say, misconfigured my material.
You didn't say anything that bad. I mean, people have to find out.
I didn't say anything offensive. I just said something that was maybe like, it was not the right audience for the political opinions that I was trying to espouse. Like the problem with cricket is the people that like cricket are Asians and Tories. And some of those Asians are Tories, and that's fine. But some of us just like cricket. We just like the game. We don't like the lifestyle associated with the game. And so sometimes some of us will be invited to do unpaid charity gigs at cricket events, and we will screw the pooch. And so, the story of that work fuck-up would take me 80 minutes to tell, but is available in the public domain. My, like, day job fuck-ups, I mean, I've already told you about Smellgate. I've fallen asleep in multiple toilets. At one point, I had just zoned out because I was so tired, and my supervisor came over, and to stop my screen from going dead, I would sometimes just zone out and just leave a book on the space bar, so it was just going the whole time. And we had got to the like ZZZ cell of Excel, like where Excel like it becomes like like hieroglyphs and shit, because I just hit space bar, so it was just continually going down. And my supervisor was like, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "Oh yes, yeah, just mentally configuring how I'm going to attack this problem."
I got fired from just going out too much and stinking too much. And actually, I've just started wearing chinos again because I'd always used to just dribble after going for a wee, and that was just really embarrassing. And I think that might have been...
you were worried about... You got the piss dribble on the chinos?
Yeah. Has anyone here, wearing a pale pair of chinos? You got to be careful.
A hand went up almost immediately. I've never had the piss dribble on the chinos. No? I think that's partly why I've never worn... I have the exact same pair of jeans in multiple...
Yeah, this is, and we are going to finish this at some point, but do you know what kind of pair of jeans you wear? Because it's hard.
Levi's 514s.
What, are they slightly thicker at the end?
They just hug my body in the right way without being skinny jeans.
Yes.
They just sit in the exact right, and there is the exact right amount of, listen, no one needs to hear this phrase, air in the gusset. There is just enough oxygenation of the undercarriage to keep that area of the body happy. But they are... I'm not sponsored by them.
There's a lot of pressure as a man to wear skinny jeans?
There's a lot of pressure of men of a certain age. I don't think there's pressure on 22-year-olds now because they all seem to be wearing like the jeans from my youth.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more to fashion than this, but it does seem to be things are either loose or tight. Like we seem to just be in a phase of like, oh, it's a new fashion, tight's back. Uh-oh, it's a new fashion, loose. Like, I'm sure it's more nuanced than that. But as an outsider looking at it, I'm sure this is the equivalent of people saying, well, it's just all a lot of noise, this music, isn't it? But just as someone that is not like a fashionista and whose clothes are mainly Levi's 514 jeans, Manchester United football tops, and band shirts that I've bought at gigs down the years, I'm not ingratiated into that world. But I would say a lot of it just seems to be like, we're back to loose again. Uh-oh, we're doing tight. Now we're doing top bit tight, bottom bit loose.
Yeah.
I don't think there's new pressure on new kids to, because like I see kids now and they are literally wearing like the jeans that I like, me and my friends, the jeans that like get mud on them at the back.
Funky Fish, and there was the skate one that would have the white bit going down the sides.
Yeah, the white bit.
It was a brand.
That must have a name. It can't be the white bit.
What happens if you step in dog mess? Anyway.
Well, that was the thing. Like in the early 2000s. It was just dog mess on your jeans at 9/11. That was all we were going through at the time. It was just muddy jeans and the war on terror. That was what was happening in the early 2000s.
There's a big thing now with shit shoes as well.
What does that mean?
Just big white shoes.
Oh yeah,
orthopedic shoes.
Clompers. My friend Charlie calls them clompers. Yeah, clompers. There's a big emphasis on clompers. Again, all I wear is I got the Cortez trainers.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I wear.
Yeah.
And, I stay in my lane, okay? I'm a 40-year-old man. I stay in my lane, okay? I have the stuff that I wear, and that is the stuff that I wear. And I wear a lot of Nehru collar shirts because for me, it's my culture. My culture is not your costume. But for a while, it was very much people's costume. And there was like a fortunate period of time for me where it was fashionable to wear Nehru collar shirts. And granddad collar for the whites. It was very fashionable.
Is that a thick collar?
No, it's the one where there's no collar and it's circular at the top. It's the Beatles jackets and Nehru jackets.
Right.
So like there was a period of time where that was very fashionable. So like I kind of dipped into being fashionable for that sort of 20-minute window. And now I've continued wearing the Nehru tops and everyone's sort of wearing like brightly coloured big shirts and then huge jeans.
That's the new rave culture where you get like the purple ones with the white collar.
Yeah.
Primark.
Listen, I think the good thing about me turning 40 is people, I think, worry that they're not going to be relevant. I've never been relevant. Like, when I was 15 years old, we were talking about this upstairs, the first gig I ever went to when I was 16 years old was Bob Dylan at the London Arena in 2002. So, like, I've never quite been in step with what's going on with my generation. And people are often like, remember nu metal? And I'm like, no, because I was listening to Jimi Hendrix and Miles Davis, okay? And I know now that sounds very cool, but in the early 2000s in Orpington, people were like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And who are the Velvet Underground?
And now you have Geese that were listening to
and now I've got, and Geese are my children. That's the headline of this podcast. I created Geese. Suck it, Cameron Winter. You're my tall white son.
And on that, thank you, Nish Kumar. Thank you, Signature Brew. And thank you all for coming. This is great.
God bless you, everyone. I invented Geese. Thank you very much.
Cheers for watching. This is 101 Part-Time Jobs. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and all podcast apps. We've done interviews with Aurora, Kneecap, Idols, Lauren Maybury of Churches, and loads more. So tap into 101 Part-Time Jobs on Spotify, Apple, and all podcast apps. Welcome along to 101 Part-Time Jobs. Every single one of our episodes is available ad-free at our Patreon, patreon.com/101 Part-Time Jobs. I know that there are all these messages trying to sell you things that you may or may not want. So for £4 a month, that's around $5.50 US, you can get over 450 of our episodes and every single one in the future, featuring all the brilliant guests that we have week in, week out, completely ad-free. You can head to patreon.com/101 Part-Time Jobs, get all your episodes bother free, and you support us directly. Cheers.